Ladies and gentlemen, it's really a privilege and an honor for me to be invited to the BOC meeting. I have to say that. I'm really deeply honored. It's true. But, you know, I'm always interested in cuckoos. I have been for 20 years, as Robert says, but now, these days, I don't work on cuckoos anymore. But I do it after dark, so to speak, and in my holidays. So I will tell you a little bit about host use by the common cuckoo in Europe. We have had a project on that, so I will tell you about that and also show you some photos that I think are quite nice and tell you a little bit about some secrets of the cuckoo.
Just touch the space bar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There it is. So first an introduction with some pictures from the year of the cuckoo, so to speak. And then I go more into host use, which species are used by the common cuckoo, why some species are used and others are not, and also spatial variation in host use. So first, introduction. As I'm sure all of you know here, the common cuckoo is an avian brood parasite. And that is a strategy that is not very common among birds. Only 1% of the birds in the world, or about 100 species, are obligate avian brood parasites. And 50 of those 100 bird species are actually cuckoos. So in Europe, we have of course the common cuckoo, but also in southern parts of Europe, we have the great spotted cuckoo, which utilizes different kinds of corvids, like magpies and crows. The common cuckoo uses passerines as hosts, and we will come back to that later. And we can say that the common cuckoo is a generalist on the species level, because we know that more than 100 different kinds of host species are known. But each specific female is host specific. That is, she utilizes only one or a few host species. And then these cuckoo females, they belong to different genties or tribes or races, many names for that. And in Europe, we have minimum 17 such cuckoo host races that utilizes different host species. That has been the common knowledge, at least, from the literature and things like that. But we will see later that this number can be higher than this. So when we talk about meadow-pipit cuckoos, reed warbler cuckoos, wagtail cuckoos, they are different tribes, but it's the same species. Some photos now, because I'm sure you're getting bored of my voice already, so you can have a look at the photos instead. It's very dear to us to see the common cuckoo male arriving in the spring. Or some of us are lucky enough to see it, but most of us only hear it. But when the male arrives, it sits down on a perch, like a branch like this, and utters its cuckoo, of course. And it's a sign of spring. And in Norway, these ones have just arrived, but I guess here in Britain, they have arrived several weeks ago, I'm sure. So what is interesting here is that you see this male cocks its tail in a way, like a fan. And it strikes me, it's more like a peacock, isn't it? So maybe this is a sexual signal, actually. But we don't know that for sure. At least I don't know that. Perhaps some of you know. But it's a very nice view anyway. But these males, they also fight a lot. So they fight for the best territories where we have most females. So you see here two males fighting in very close to a reed bed, where you typically have reed warblers breeding, and also then a lot of cuckoo females. When they are not fighting, they are feeding, and these juicy, poisonous, hairy caterpillars are among the favorite foods of the cuckoo. Not many other bird species eat caterpillars like this, but the cuckoo loves them. I think this caterpillar belongs to one butterfly called the brown tail, but I'm not really sure. So the females also, in addition to eating, they need to look out for nests. So they are sitting in usually a hidden place, watching for host activity and trying to find the host nests. They can sit like this, motionless, for many, many hours. And finally, they may find a host nest at the correct stage. There must be eggs in it. Then she visits the nest. This is a great reed warbler nest from Hungary. She looks into the nest, steals 1 or 2 host eggs, like you see here, and then she lays her own egg. And she's often very quick, so that the hosts will not notice her. But that is not always the case. Here she has come into real trouble. So these are great reed warblers, and they are quite big birds. And they are fierce birds, aggressive birds. So they will immediately attack the cuckoo, sit on the back of the cuckoo, pecking it, and pecking the head. She's desperately trying to lay her egg. She has stolen 1 host egg and she's about to lay, but she may be driven off by this activity. And in Hungary, actually, where great reed warblers are very common hosts, you can actually find 4 or 5 cuckoo eggs in one great reed warbler nest, which is, you can never find that in Norway or in Britain. It just shows us it's a lot of cuckoos there. But in Hungary, they have found cuckoo females that have been driven into the water and have drowned because of these attacks. So it's a dangerous business being a cuckoo. But if she succeeds, then she will fly away with the host egg like this. And she will swallow it. And of course, this is advantageous for the cuckoo female, because she will then receive calcium, nutrients that she needs to produce more eggs throughout the season. And the end result, if everything is successful for the cuckoo, you will find a cuckoo egg together with several host eggs. And this is a parasitized marsh warbler nest from Bulgaria, and you can see the fantastic mimicry on this cuckoo egg. And mimicry is, of course, that resembles between the cuckoo egg and the host eggs. That is very important, this resemblance, because if it's not resembling the host egg, then the host is likely to reject this egg, which is, of course, not very good for the cuckoo. So the cuckoo has evolved these mimetic eggs, as I said, and many of these 17 tribes of cuckoos, they are mimicking the eggs of their hosts. And here you see some examples. I guess you can point out the cuckoo egg because of its size. It's a little bit larger than the host eggs, but look at the background color and the spotting pattern. It's really fantastic. And also the egg size, it's very small for such a big bird, actually. So this slide just shows the enormous variation you have between the different cuckoo eggs in the different tribes. Perhaps the most striking is this blue one that you find in red starts and also in wind chats. I have also added this one. This is my doing. It's not the cuckoo's doing. You can see it from the shape, I think. But these white eggs are also found in the Alps from cuckoos parasitizing black red stars. So that's an own tribe in the Alps, in Austria and Switzerland, also down in northern Germany. No, southern Germany, sorry, that utilizes black red stars. And they even fly into houses to parasitize the black red stars. Hay barns and things like that. But of course, egg mimicry is the textbook example. And equally famous, I guess, is the non-mimetic cuckoo eggs in the Dunnocks. Like you find a lot of here in UK, in England. And you can clearly see the pale blue Dunnock eggs differ distinctly from the cuckoo eggs. And the reason for this is, of course, that the Dunnock accepts all kinds of eggs that are laid into its nest. So it's no need for the cuckoo to evolve a mimetic egg in this species. But it's very strange. It's a favorite host in UK, in Belgium, Netherlands, also in Denmark, in some places. But still, rejection behavior has not evolved. Even Shakespeare described the Dunnock as a host to the cuckoo several hundred years ago. Another case of non-mimetic eggs that is not very known to people is the wren and the cuckoo. These are eggs from the very fine collection at Tring, the Natural History Museum collection in Tring. These are all from Stokke, or Słupsk is the name now, in Pomerania in Poland. Used to be in Germany. The Germans went far and near to collect cuckoo eggs, just like the British did. And here you can again see that the cuckoo egg is really non-mimetic. But what is interesting with the wren, I found out from reading the old literature, which is really a mine of information. One German naturalist, he found that, you know, the wren has a domed nest, as you can see here, with a small entrance. But when the cuckoo comes and looks into the nest, it will sometimes enlarge this opening. And then the wren will desert the nest. So it's not deserting the eggs, but it's deserting because it thinks there has been a predator or something like that inside. I will desert it. So this is not necessarily an anti-parasite strategy. It could be an anti-predator strategy, which also works with the cuckoo. But this time it was not fooled. So it's very interesting to see a small wren trying to feed a cuckoo. Sometimes it's almost disappearing into the mouth of the cuckoo. But wrens are favorite hosts in southwestern Europe, in Germany and Poland, but not very much so here in UK. So after hatching, the cuckoo chick is blind and naked. You can see the egg tooth barely here that it used to get out from the eggshell. And the first thing it does is to start to evict the host young and eggs. Taking them on the back, climbing backwards against the nest rim, and using its hollow back, its concave back, it's easier to balance the egg or chick on it, and then it evicts all the eggs, all the young, so it grows up alone in the nest. The same goes for other parasites. Clear spottiswooders work a lot on honeyguides, and they don't evict host young, but they stab them to death with these raptor-like bills. So nature is cruel, but it's very advantageous for both the honeyguides and the cuckoos to grow up alone in the nest, because it will then receive all the parental care of the hosts. So that was not a short introduction, I would say, but an introduction. You saw the year of the cuckoo with some illustrations. So now we can go over to species used. And before we do that, we have to consider the range, the distribution of the cuckoo. It is a bird that you can find from Ireland and Portugal in the west, all the way to Kamchatka and Japan in the east. So the yellow here is the breeding grounds. And it winters down in sub-Saharan Africa and also in Southeast Asia. If we look more carefully on Western Palearctic, it's like this. We find it throughout, also in North Africa, where it uses, for instance, Musier's red stars. It's a kind of funiculus species, except on Iceland and in the treeless tundra in the north. And this wide distribution also means that it will come into contact with a lot of different potential host species. So this was exactly what we were setting out to do in a project that we call Cuckoo Base. We wanted to figure out the spatial and temporal variation in host use in Europe. It was funded by the Norwegian Research Council, and what we did was that we tried to gather as much information on cuckoo parasitism as we could in Europe. So that is cuckoo eggs and chicks. So I think I went through more like 10,000 publications and notes and books and things like that. It has taken me 8 years to finish this. I'm still not finished though. I'm still collecting data. So if you have some data somewhere made, just inform me. And I'm also updating every year with the newest data. So from various sources, as I said, literature, but also museum egg collections, of course, like at Tring, very important. I got information from museums all over Europe. So now we have 65,000 cases, which is quite a lot, spanning 200 years all over Europe. And here I have roughly just made some geographical entities that you can see in different colors, some neighboring countries merged together. And the numbers here refer to the number of cases I have from that different regions. So you see not very many down here in the southeast. UK and Germany, very good data. Scandinavia, not too bad. But Russia, the vast continent more like, not that much. But still not too bad. I have to mention the Natural History Museum at Tring especially because it has the best collection of cuckoo eggs in the world. More than 5,000 cuckoo eggs. So it's a mine of information, mine of data for us researchers. I have been there several times, I guess more than 10 now, measuring eggs with calipers, with spectrophotometer, taking photos of them, obtaining data on locality, date, things like that, for different kinds of research projects. Also, I have been visiting the very nice library they have there, because in this, the field, for instance, you can never retrieve the field from Norway, the journal of the field, but very much interesting information about cuckoo parasitism there. So just go in there, browse these old journals. For me, it's very, very good. I actually go back there now, tonight, to do some more research. So, when we are looking at which species are used as hosts, we can do this by many different ways. Here I have mentioned 2 ways that we have looked at. These are only preliminary results, I have to say. We can look at real parasitism rates, and these are from field studies. People going out in the field, counting that and that many nests, and found that and that many cuckoo eggs and chicks. For instance, blackbirds in Kassel, Hesse in Germany, 1 out of 200 nests were parasitized. That is 0.5%. So I have collected 1,872 such cases now. The other thing we can do is something we call relative parasitism. Then we look at one of these geographical entities that we looked at, and we take the number of cases in a specific species of parasitism, divided by the total number of cases in all species in the entity. For instance, the robin in Germany, where we have 838 cases out of 16,768, so 5%. So that's also a way to do it. So in Europe, there are about 182 species of passerines breeding, and we have then set, after long discussions and thinking, relative parasitism above 2% in one of these entities means it's a regular host. And the way we have tried to control this is to look for these 17 species where you have unknown gens. And we have now included all those, but also 13 others if you use that measure. So there seems to be more than 17 species that are regularly used by cuckoos. And when I talk about entity, this map you have seen before. So these are the different entities in the different colors. So let's have a look at the families of passerines that are utilized. So I told you 30 species, that is 16.5%, have a relative parasitism in the entity of more than 2%. But as many as 123 species were actually parasitized, but only once or a few times, many of them. But still a very high number, 67.6% of all the passerines. So if you have a look at the families here, it's clear that wagtails and pipits, 5 species there. We have the wren, we have the Dunnock, 12 species of different kinds of warblers, that is Sylvia, Procephalus, species like that. Also Hippolytes pallida in Bulgaria has a known tribe. Small thrushes and spotted flycatcher, and shrikes, our favorite hosts, brambling, and the corn bumpkin. So these are the 30 different species. Hornbuntings also heavily used in Bulgaria, in fact. I've done some studies there on hornbuntings, olivaceous warblers, marsh warblers, and great reed warblers that are all used in the same area. What about UK and Germany, these countries where we have most data? Well, you see the reed warbler ranks top in both countries, but then you see it's a lot of variation between these two countries which ranks up at the top. So Dunnocks, second in UK, but not present on the 10 top list in Germany. Meadow pipit, high up in UK, quite low in Germany, only in the northwest of Germany. White wagtail is common, or pied wagtail, common in both areas. Robin in the middle. Here you have sedge warbler, tree pipit, but here wren, redstart, yellow wagtail. So, and redback strikes and garden warblers heavily used in parts of Germany, in fact, at least in the old days. Remember that this does not have to be a present day. It spans 200 years, this data. So we have these 30 species with a relative parasitism above 2%. In addition, there are 18 species that we don't know the status of. They could be possible hosts with a relative parasitism between 1 and 2%. And one example of this is the willow warbler, which experiments have shown that it's a very good egg rejector. It's really aggressive towards a stuffed cuckoo. You see it's starting to be a little bit shaggy, this cuckoo. It has been attacked a lot. So these were probably hosts in the past, but we don't find any evidence that they are hosts now, within the last 200 years. And there are several species like this. So, in the UK, 87% of parasitism events happened in only 13 species, only 15% of the species. And the same goes for Germany, only 15% of the species. So this means it's a lot of species that are not utilized. So we wanted to investigate which factors may explain variation in host use. So here we used 3 different data sets. Firstly, the 2 countries with the most data, UK and Germany. And here we used cases of parasitism as a response variable. But we also used the data set with parasitism rate as a response variable, and here we have almost 2,000 cases. What about predictors then? What could predict the variation in host use? Well, we based these on other studies that have been undertaken showing characteristics that have been shown to be maybe of importance for cuckoo host selection. And we retrieved this data from BirdLife International, from the Handbook of the Birds of the Western Arctic, and also the Handbook der Vögel Mitteleuropas by Wrens and colleagues. So we retrieved information on population sizes, different breeding characteristics, that is breeding overlap between the host and the cuckoo, habitat, diet that is brought to the, or food that is brought to the chicks, nest cup depth, nest structure, nest height above ground, and female host body size. So we entered these into the models. And these results have just been published in scientific reports. We're out in April, so you can read more about it there. But I can take you to some basics. So here we have the 4 predictors that was of importance for determining host suitability. So up here we have nest structure, cavity, crevice, dome, open. We have habitat of the host, forest, grassland, rocky areas, shrubland, and wetlands. We have food for chicks, insects, or plant material, and we have the female host body size down here. And we have all 3 data sets here: UK, green circles; Germany, blue circles; and parasitism rate data are these horizontal lines. And the higher the level in each panel, the higher is the risk of parasitism. So, looking at the first one, nest structure, we clearly see that there are very few species that breed in cavities that are used as hosts, compared to the three other types. But the crested tit is a hole nester, and it may be used as a host if it breeds like this. This is more like you would expect from a spotted flycatcher, actually. So, and this is actually, I think there are 4 cases of crested tit parasitism in my database, and all are such aberrant breeding places like this. So, it's a lot of variation in nature. Even though the crested tit is a hole nester, this one, it didn't nest in a hole and was parasitized. The next is the habitat of the hosts, and here we see that in UK, shrubland species are favored hosts, while in Germany, wetland species and grassland species are favored. So it's a difference between the countries there. But when it comes to food for chicks, you clearly see that insects are very important for the cuckoo chick to survive. And also, body size, a moderate body size leads to a higher risk of parasitism than being very large or very small. So we also made a host suitability index based on these models, where we have species here in the bars. 0 means very, very poor cuckoo host, and 1 means fantastic cuckoo host. So you see, most hosts, they are in between there. There are no clear cuts, or very few clear cuts. This is raven, this is jackdaw, but the other ones are in the middle somewhere, and many towards the suitable end of the scale. And these black bars here are actually the species where we know have a separate cuckoo tribe. So these are favorite cuckoo hosts shown by others in previous works. So it seems the suitability index works quite well, at least. But as is typical with mathematical models, it's not 100%. Then to the final chapter. I guess I've been talking quite long, but it's not very, I'm quite soon finished actually. So again, we have this entity map that we were talking about previously. Now I just want to show you the maps of some of the species that are used by the cuckoo and where they are used in Europe. Consider these different entities. Reed warbler, for instance, green here is relative parasitism above 2%, so it means it's a regular host. Yellow, between 0.5 and 2%, so not a regular host up there in Scandinavia. And this is obviously also because reed warblers are quite rare in many parts of Scandinavia. But you can see the reed warbler, common host throughout. White wagtails, all the same, but not that much used in southwestern parts of Europe. So again, you see spatial variation in hosts. Sedge warblers, much used in UK, Netherlands, Belgium, Denmark, a little bit also in Germany, Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, but not much elsewhere. The pink here is relative parasitism below 0.5%, so not very much used. Wren, also very much used in southwest, Germany and Poland. And as I told you, the black redstart, I have never found a black redstart cuckoo egg, but that is a dream, so I have to go to the Alps to try to find one. Very, or quite common in the Alps. Gray here means that black redstarts are not used at all, and that is obviously because they are very, very rare in these areas. So what can explain spatial variation in host use? Obviously, host population size could matter. So I just made a figure of that. Here we have acrocephalous species, warblers, anthus species, pipits, And these are very common cuckoo hosts. And on the x-axis here, we have the relative parasitism. On the y-axis, we have the population size. So you see, it seems that the cuckoo need a threshold of number of host pairs to thrive in that area. You can see here, for the anthers, no parasitism here until you reach a threshold. And the same with the acrocephalus warblers. And this is not difficult to understand. The cocoon needs a supply of host nest to maintain its population. And this was exactly what we found also in a previous study on reed warblers. The threshold for reed warblers, these are different populations throughout Europe. These are parasitized and these are not. And the threshold was 14 pairs per hectare, more or less. Below that, it was not parasitized. Breeding phenology is another factor that could be important. For instance, if the hosts breed before the cuckoo arrives in the spring, it will not be parasitized. And this could vary in different places of Europe, obviously, leading also to spatial variation. And then we have something called dependent use of host species. And this is exemplified here by the redback strike and the barred warbler. So this means that the use of one species is dependent on the use of the other species. So we know that, for instance, around Leipzig and Dresden in Germany, redback strikes at least used to be very, very common hosts. One of the main egg collectors in Germany, Eugen Rey, he found a lot of cuckoo eggs in these species. And barred warblers, they are often breeding very close to redback strikes. And those pairs that did were often parasitized by the cuckoo. While if they were breeding alone, without redback strikes, they were often not parasitized. So this can also lead to spatial variation. Habitat composition could be important. If you have a heterogeneous habitat with many different host species compared to one homogeneous habitat, like the large reed beds in Hungary or the great large taiga forests in Finland, where you have only one or a few host species. And spatial scale can be important. Remember that we have these entities that we saw previously with Russia, Scandinavia, big entities. But things can happen on a much more local scale than that. Consider the chiff-chaff. If you look at these entities, it does not come up with a relative parasitism above 2%. But I read a story, it was not a fairy tale, I hope. It was, I hope it was valid, but it was one German researcher, and these German researchers, they are really writing up everything they do. Very detailed, which is very nice for us. He was working in Bavaria and found parasitism by the cuckoo of chiff-chaff of more than 20% for a 10-year period. And these cuckoos were even laying mimetic eggs. So this points to that the scale that you're looking at could also be important. Same goes for the chiff-chaff, no, the chaffinch. Very common bird in Europe, but not very much used, except around Moscow, where it is quite heavily used. At least it was heavily used, according to Moishevsky, a Russian scientist. So what about UK? Here we have the list of the 7 main species, host species in UK. But this is, the whole of UK merged. What if we divide UK into different regions? We have Scotland, Northern England, Central, Southern, and Wales. And then we find a completely other pattern. We see that Dunnocks are mostly used in Central and Southern England. Reed warblers the same. Meadow pipits, Scotland, Wales, northern parts. In Scotland, almost exclusively meadow pipits, just like in Norway. White wagtails in Wales and in the central regions, robins on the south almost, sedge warblers in the central, I guess perhaps around Thames and these rivers there, and tree pipits in Wales and the northern parts. So again you see a huge spatial variation within UK. So now I have actually plotted all these 65,000 cases on Google Earth. It was quite a lot of work. I also had to try to figure out these old German names. It said it was Germany, but today it could be Poland or wherever. So it was really, really difficult, but I managed. So these are all species merged. So what we now can do is that we can look at land use maps and EVI and things like that and try to sort out why we have this spatial variation in host use. And just to show you one of the species maps, this is the reed warbler. We can produce such maps for all the 123 species that are parasitized. So here you see the reed warbler. Yeah. So many of the photos I have shown you today are taken by Olda Mikulica, which is the photographer in this book that came out last year. So if you want to read more about the cuckoo, you can find something there. It's a popular scientific book where I and two others have written some short texts, captions, and also small chapters. But there are many good books out there. So also by Nick Davis, for instance, he has a lot of, or several very nice books. But this one is very nice to just lay in bed and look at the photos. Don't mind about the text. So I have to thank a lot of people. Without their help, it would not be possible to do this work. Douglas here, for instance, at the Natural History Museum in Tring, Robert, and the staff at many different museums around in Europe, and also the colleagues, of course, and amateur ornithologists for sharing their data. Frode Fosse and Mirja Ratikainen has been also participating in this project together with me. And the photos, as I said, by Olda Mikulica and a Finnish photographer called Juha Haikola. And thank you very much for your attention.